Have you ever come home after a perfectly productive day, and the moment the door closes, something inside you just shuts off? If that sounds familiar, this isn't laziness, burnout, or just being tired. It may be one of the silent symptoms of high-functioning depression. Because here's the truth. You can wake up before the alarm, meal prep, answer emails, hit deadlines, smile at co-workers, and still feel absolutely nothing on the inside. You look stable, disciplined, reliable. Your life is tidy. Clean apartment, organized calendar, polite conversations, weekend brunch photos. Nothing looks wrong, but no one sees the moments in between. The way you sit in your car long after parking, unable to make yourself get out. The way your smile lands perfectly, but your eyes never fully join in. The way you keep yourself constantly busy because silence feels like a place where something heavy is waiting. It's not sadness. It's the absence of feeling, a slow dimming, like the colors of your life are fading one shade at a time. And the reason you haven't been able to fix it is simple. All the usual advice, positive thinking, self-care weekends, staying busy, only treats the surface. High-functioning depression doesn't respond to motivation. It hides underneath it. So in this video, we're going deeper. We'll uncover where this mask is formed, the neuroscience behind why you can function but feel nothing, the hidden symptoms most people ignore, and the steps to finally unmask without falling apart. By the end, you'll understand what's happening inside you and why you're not broken. Let's begin. High-functioning depression doesn't suddenly appear in adulthood. It is crafted slowly, quietly, in the places where a child first learns what love costs and what emotions are allowed to exist. For many, the mask begins in a home that looked normal from the outside. No chaos, no visible abuse, just an absence, subtle, invisible, of emotional presence. Maybe you grew up with parents who provided everything except attunement. They bought the school supplies, signed the permission slips, made sure you were fed, but they never asked, "How are you?" Really? So you learned early that your sadness was inconvenient. Your fears were overreactions. Your needs were too much. And little by little, you trained yourself to stop feeling them. For some, the mask began even earlier with parentification. You weren't just a child. You were the emotional adult in the room. You soothed a stressed mother. You managed a volatile father. You kept siblings calm. You were rewarded, not for being expressive, but for being useful. And then there are those raised in performance-based love homes, where applause replaced affection, where achievement meant acceptance, and mistakes meant withdrawal. You didn't learn to chase dreams. You learned to chase safety through perfection. Across all these childhoods, one lesson repeats. My feelings are a burden. My value is in what I do, not who I am. So the mask was not chosen. It was inherited. A survival strategy that made perfect sense when you were small, but now, as an adult, has become a barrier between you and your own inner world. High-functioning depression is not weakness. It is the echo of a child who had to become strong far too early. If major depression feels like a sudden storm, loud, violent, impossible to ignore, then dysthymia is winter, a long, unchanging cold that settles into the bones of your everyday life. Clinically, it's called persistent depressive disorder, a low, heavy mood, lasting not days or weeks, but years. For many people, not 2 years, but 10 or 20, so long that the greyness becomes familiar, almost comfortable, You stop calling it sadness. You start calling it normal. Dysthymia doesn't usually stop you from functioning. You go to work. You reply to messages. You pay bills on time. You exist. But you exist at half volume, a muted version of yourself. Food tastes the same. Achievements feel flat. Holidays come and go without leaving much of a trace. Life becomes a sequence of tasks rather than experiences. And because the suffering is quiet, people rarely notice. Even you don't notice, at least not in a way that feels urgent. You tell yourself, everyone's tired. It's just stress. This is adulthood. But beneath the surface, dysthymia slowly rewires your baseline, lowering your emotional ceiling and raising your emotional floor until joy becomes rare and pain becomes dull, like a bruise that never fully heals. This is why high-functioning depression is so often overlooked. It doesn't scream, it whispers, it blends in. It convinces you that being fine is the same as being alive. And for years, sometimes decades, people live in this faded world, never realizing how much color has quietly slipped away. One of the most dangerous things about high-functioning depression is how adaptable it is. Not because it heals, but because it hides. The human mind is remarkably skilled at building routines that protect us from feeling what hurts. For many, this adaptation begins almost unconsciously. You fill your schedule until there's no room for silence. You keep moving errands, workouts, deadlines, because stillness feels like a place where something unwanted might catch up to you. You treat productivity not as ambition, but as anesthesia. Over time, life becomes highly structured, almost mechanical. Wake up, work, exercise, perform, repeat. Every day feels predictable enough that you never have to check in with yourself. Then comes autopilot mode, a mental state where you execute tasks flawlessly but experience nothing deeply. You're efficient, responsive, even impressive, but internally you're disconnected, drifting just a few inches outside your own life. This adaptation works so well that decades can pass without a breaking point. You don't fall apart, you simply fade. You don't feel joy, but you also don't feel enough pain to ask for help. And that is the trap. You become so good at functioning that you forget functioning was never the goal. Survival becomes routine, and numbness becomes home, until one day you look back and realize you've been gone from your own life for years. High-functioning depression rarely looks like the stereotypes people expect. There are no dramatic breakdowns, no visible crises, no obvious cries for help. Instead, it hides behind traits society praises, traits that look like strength but are actually symptoms of emotional suppression. The first is maladaptive perfectionism, not the healthy desire to do well, but the belief that worth is earned through flawless performance. For many, this began in childhood, where achievement brought approval and mistakes brought distance. Now, as adults, perfection becomes a shield. If I never slip, no one will see how much I'm struggling. The second is intellectualization. Pain is turned into analysis. Instead of feeling sadness, you categorize it. You explain it. You rationalize it away by comparing your life to people who have it worse. It sounds mature, insightful even, but it keeps you emotionally disconnected, living entirely in your head. Then there is people-pleasing, the reflex to care for everyone but yourself, to be the friend who listens, supports, fixes all, while silently starving for the same tenderness you give to others. You've learned that being needed feels safer than being known. And finally, hyper-independence, the conviction that asking for help is weakness. You carry everything alone, not because you're strong, but because once, long ago, help wasn't available. Individually, these traits look admirable. Together, they form the perfect camouflage. A persona so competent, so self-sufficient, so put together, that no one, not even you, recognizes it as a mask built to hide the ache underneath. High-functioning depression rarely makes a loud entrance. It slips into your life quietly, showing up in the tiny moments, the ones so subtle you dismiss them as nothing. But these micro-symptoms are the fingerprints of something deeper. You wake up after 7, 8, even 9 hours of sleep, and still feel like you haven't rested at all. Your body moves, but your mind feels wrapped in fog, like you're walking underwater while everyone else moves through air. You notice that anticipation has disappeared. Birthdays, holidays, weekends, things that used to spark energy, now pass by gently, without excitement. You go, you show up, you smile, but it all lands softly, without colour. There are moments when you stare at a wall or out a window for longer than you intend, not because you're thinking, but because you feel nothing to pull you back into the room. You find yourself responding to texts hours later, not out of avoidance, but because the emotional effort feels heavier than it should. Conversations become performances. You play your part well, but internally, you're detached, hovering slightly outside your own body. Your memory gets patchy. Simple decisions feel strangely difficult, and joy, once a familiar visitor, becomes unpredictable, rare, fleeting. None of these moments look dramatic from the outside, but up close, they reveal a life quietly losing its emotional texture. These are the early cracks in the mask, the signs that your inner world is fading, even while your outer life appears perfectly intact. To understand why someone can appear so put together while feeling so empty inside, we have to look beneath the surface into the architecture of a brain that has been in survival mode for years. High-functioning depression often involves a disconnect between two major systems: the limbic system, where emotions live, and the prefrontal cortex, PFC, the logical manager of the mind. For many high-achieving individuals, the PFC becomes overdeveloped, hyperactive, even. It steps in like a strict supervisor, constantly suppressing emotional signals to keep you functional. Not now. We don't have time for this. Push through. This suppression works until it doesn't. Emotion doesn't disappear, it accumulates. And keeping it locked down requires enormous metabolic energy. That's why you feel drained, even when nothing stressful happened. Your brain spends the entire day holding itself together. Then there's cortisol, the stress hormone. Chronic low-grade stress keeps it elevated day after day. Over time, cortisol wears down the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory, emotional regulation, and focus. This is why you may feel foggy, forgetful, or disconnected. And when you finally rest on a weekend, a holiday, a day off, the PFC loosens its grip, your body drops out of survival mode, and all the exhaustion hits at once. Some call this burnout. Others call it leisure sickness. But really, it's your nervous system finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. Your brain isn't failing you. It's adapting, just in ways that were never meant to be permanent. People often assume that if someone is functioning, working, smiling, showing up, they must be safe. But with high-functioning depression, the opposite can be true. The very traits that keep someone moving forward are the same traits that make their breaking point sudden, unexpected, and severe. When you live in a constant state of emotional suppression, your system has no reserves, no buffer, no space to absorb a shock. So when life delivers a hit, a breakup, a layoff, a betrayal, a loss, it doesn't just hurt. It collapses the fragile architecture that has been holding everything together. For someone with traditional depression, low energy can make drastic actions difficult, but high-functioning individuals still possess their planning skills, decisiveness, and discipline. When despair finally cracks through the mask, they have the capability and the momentum to act on it. This is why loved ones often say, "I didn't see it coming. They were doing so well. The mask worked perfectly until the moment it shattered." A crash like this is not evidence of weakness. It's evidence of how long someone has been surviving without support, how expertly they've hidden the weight, how deeply they've convinced themselves they didn't need help. And when the breaking point arrives, it arrives fast. Not because the pain is new, but because it has been silently building for years. Healing from high-functioning depression isn't a dramatic transformation. It doesn't look like waking up one morning suddenly full of joy, clarity, and motivation. And it certainly doesn't look like trying harder. If anything, healing begins when you finally stop trying to outperform your pain. The first step is recognition, noticing the numbness, not dismissing it. It means admitting, quietly, this grayness isn't normal, and I'm allowed to want more than survival. Then comes allowing micro-feelings, not huge emotional releases, not instant breakthroughs, just noticing small flickers of emotion without rushing to silence them. A moment of irritation, a moment of sadness, a moment of softness. These are signs your emotional system is thawing, not failing. Healing also involves retraining the nervous system, learning to sit with stillness without panicking, letting your body unwind from years of tension, understanding that rest is not laziness, it is repair. Therapy, for many, becomes a place not to fix themselves, but to feel themselves, to rebuild the emotional muscles that were numbed in childhood, to learn the language of their inner world again. Another step is confronting identity. Who are you without productivity? Who are you without being the strong one, the helpful one, the funny one? Healing requires gently loosening these identities, not abandoning them, but no longer using them as armor. And perhaps the hardest part, accepting support, letting someone sit with you in the heaviness, letting someone see you without the mask. Not because you're weak, but because connection is how humans heal. Unmasking isn't dramatic. It's slow, courageous, and deeply human. A return, piece by piece, to the self you've been away from for far too long. There comes a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize that being fine has never been the same as being alive. You've spent years perfecting the mask, strengthening the exterior, showing the world a version of yourself that could keep going no matter what. But you were never meant to live as a machine of habits and responsibilities. You were meant to feel, to rest, to be held, to exist without performing. You are allowed to be more than productive, more than reliable, more than the strong one. Your worth was never supposed to depend on how much you endure. Maybe healing starts here with a small permission to soften, to slow down, to exist without proving anything, to remember that sunlight feels different when you step into it, not just look at it through a window, to remember that connection requires presence, not perfection, and to remember that your inner world deserves the same care you so generously give to others. If this video made you feel seen, even for a moment, I want you to know you are not alone. There is a whole community here, learning to unmask, to breathe again, to live again. So if you'd like to stay on this journey with us, subscribe to the channel. And if you feel safe to share, even just a sentence, leave a comment below. Tell us what resonated, what you've been carrying, or simply, I'm here. Your story matters, and you deserve a life that is more than functional.